Um, Hello. So today I'm going to show you how minimal modeling is actually done. We're going to use WordPress as the example database. WordPress is, of course, a very popular open source content management system used for blogging and so on. WordPress is based on MySQL, and if you look at the database schema, you will see that it has 12 tables and 94 columns, which is a pretty small number, and could be probably done. The modeling could be done completely in a very limited time. We'll see about that. So I have a WordPress instance installed locally on my laptop using Docker. Here is the shell to the MySQL that is running that handles this instance. This instance responds on the local IP, and you see that it has like a sample page. It has two small example posts. It's proudly powered by WordPress. We have an access to the admin UI. We see the post categories tags, and we're going to find out how all of this is represented in the database. I'm going to use Notion again, the same way I used that for the Mokum case study. So we have 5 usual pages. So first we have the WordPress SQL schema, which is just a MySQL dump made from the live installation. Second, we have a table of anchors, which is currently empty. We have a table of attributes and links, the main 3 things that minimal modeling uses to model every database. We also have a secondary database, which will contain information about all sorts of technical columns and so on. I also have database schema in a separate file that I'm going to use to keep track of my progress. So I'm going to edit this file locally and remove the lines that we already kind of processed. You're going to see that. WordPress has a official description of the database. You can find it in the official WordPress wiki codex. It has database diagram, it has overview of the tables, and it has the kind of description of each table that is, well, almost not described. Well, not described. Yeah, it kind of has or not. Anyway, so first thing that we do is that we kind of look at the list of the tables that our database has. So we have 12 tables here, and we see that it has like 5 tables that end in meta, which is probably something we don't want to care about for now. So we have comments, links, options, posts, term relationships, term taxonomy, terms, and users. We are gonna find out what all of that means in a moment. So let's begin with anchors. You always begin with anchors. I had some experience working with WordPress. I had few blogs based on that, but I don't know the database in detail. I have only a general understanding of how it works, right? And so it's a pretty typical case of how minimal modeling could be used to make sense of the database that you have. So you begin with something with an anchor that is most important, one of the most important anchors. So what could that be? Well, I'd say that it's going to be posts. So we have a table called posts, and what the anchor does, it only keeps track of ID. All the data is going to go to attributes of that anchor. So we go to anchors DB. The noun is going to be post, and ID query is going to be an SQL query that would show us the list of post IDs. We can see from the definition of this field that the type is begin, which allows us to have a lot of posts. The next cell that we should fill is existence. So the question is, what happens if there is an ID? What happens if there is a row in this WP posts table? So if there is an ID, then there is a post that could be accessible on the WordPress site, right? So we say if exists, then there is a post on the website. So nothing to remark because this is all pretty simple. And what we did here is we can now remove the ID. We see that anchor is not really a primary key, but it's very close to primary key. So what we see here is that this ID column, it has auto increment modifier, and also there is a primary key. It's defined as a primary key. So this is a very strong suggestion that this is going to be an anchor. This is not always the case because in the but we will see why later. So for now, we remove this processed column from this schema that is in progress. Now we kind of know, right. We can also take a look, select ID from WP posts. Wow, interesting. I didn't know that there are 9 posts, actually 8 posts in this database. We'll find out why and what are those posts. The next thing that we're gonna do is create the first attribute. It's going to be based off the post anchor. And the first thing that comes to mind is the text of the post. It should be somewhere, right? So let's take a look at the list of the columns that we have here. And one thing that we see is post content. Its data type is long text, and it's kind of suggests that this is probably what we want to have. So let's let's try to do this select. It's not really readable, but we can see that if you look at the so we have hello world, welcome to WordPress. This is your first post, edit or deleted. So, and this is what we see. This is ID equals 1, and it says welcome to WordPress. This is your first post, edit or deleted, then start writing. Then we have some sorts of probably examples. This is our second post. Let's comment it. Wow. And if we look at the second post that I have on this on the local website, so it says this is our second post. Let's comment. So probably we're on the right track, but I don't understand why we have 3 copies of these 3 posts with the same content. Probably this means that that WordPress keeps track of the history of the post edit. We're gonna find that out. This is a perfectly normal situation for modeling for modeling the database that you see for the first time. Basically, you're going to improve your understanding as you go on with the modeling. So let's add the attribute. So first attribute is going to be called post __ content. Here we're going to use kind of this name is going to be like technical. It's not particularly human readable because we need this as the kind of to refer to those rows in Notion. We will see that later. So which anchor is this attribute does it kind of refers to? Of course, it's going to be a post. Right. Oops. What's its type? It's going to be long text. Here we use just the MySQL data types. If you want, you can like physical data types, data type. If in some cases you can just use something more generic like string or text to show that it's like a bigger text than the like a small string, right? Such as, I don't know, the title of the post, for example. We're going to see that. And the physical location is going to be the small SQL query that fetches ID and the value of the column that we that contains post content. Next, we have a question. So what is the data that this attribute contains? We always use a question form here, because in principle we could say like content of the post, but some practice shows that it's going to be, and it works for simple cases, but we will probably see that asking a question here helps in some more complicated cases. So we are going to say what is the content of the post. There is nothing to remark. It's pretty simple. So, wow, we have the first attribute here, and we remove the post content from our schema in progress. Next, we already mentioned title, and it's possible to, and maybe we should just add it as another attribute. So we have post __ title. The anchor is the post. Type is text again, which is pretty strange, but I guess that this is how it makes sense for given how versatile WordPress is. It's probably easier this way. And the physical location is, of course, going to look almost like this. It's going to be post title. And the question is going to be, what is the title of the post? Let's check that our query returns something sensible. All right. So we have a hello world post. We have sample page privacy policy. We have 3 copies of our second post, which we still don't understand. We have auto draft, and we'll see what all of this means. Remove the post title from the file. Next thing that we probably want to see is a link. Link is a relationship between 2 anchors, and a typical relationship that happens in many database systems, and especially in content management, is who is the author of this post, right? And we can see that there is a column that is named post author. And maybe it's what we think it is. And we remember from the list of the tables that there is a WP users table. So let's investigate that. So link link exists between 2 anchors, but we now have only one defined. So let's define the user anchor. The noun is going to be user. The ID query is going to be select ID from WP users, right? Right. We have one user. It's probably me. From WP users. we can see that ID, let's scroll to WP users. We see that ID is also begin. It's also auto increment and it has the primary key. It's defined as the primary key. So we seem to be on the right path. So existence, if exists, then there is a user on the website. Now that we have we're not going to bother with attributes of the user right now. We're going to do that in a moment. But for now, we can create our first link. So first, we have to write a small sentence. So what we could do is like user post is authored by user. We could also use the other direction. We could say something like user authors post. This is not a big deal, but this is a very interesting kind of topic, and it's going to be, we're going to discuss that in more detail sometime later. For now, let's just choose one of the directions and keep. So the main point is that there is no right direction. It would be perfect if we would be able to always use both directions of the sentence, because this helps thinking about different aspects of this link. So the first anchor is going to be post, and the second anchor is going to be user. And query. So we have to write such a query that returns two IDs, a list of pairs of IDs. First is the post ID and then user ID. So we have the WP posts table. We have ID column that we kind of removed from here, and we have the post author. So let's try to do that. Select ID post author from WP posts. We see that for all of for each of our 8 posts, they are all written by the first and only user. And we are going to copy this query to Notion. Great. So next step is cardinality. In minimal modeling, we use only 3 cardinalities for now. And here we have 1 to n cardinality. It means that a comment can belong only to a single post, and a single, that user can have multiple posts, and post is authored by a single user. Another example, for the typical example of M2N cardinality is things like projects assigned to developers. You can have multiple developers assigned to a project, and you can have multiple projects assigned to developers. We're gonna see that later. Audit columns. Let's skip it for now, but we will probably fill in this cell later when we are going to look at other columns, and we will actually database columns, and we're going to see that they are actually audit columns for this attribute. Maybe we'll see. There are no remarks because it's all pretty simple. And the attributes here, there are not all links have attributes of their own, and we will see if WordPress has any examples of that. So we now have the post author column documented, so we can remove it from here, and we can also see that it's expected that the post author has the index defined on that, because we want to have like a typical query that probably happens in WordPress is get me a list of posts that belong to a certain user. Anyway, remove it for now. So let's continue with maybe we can continue with users and see what we have. So we go to attributes. We documented the ID column in WP users, so we can clear it from here. By the way, we're only editing the local copy of this file, but here, of course, for reference, you can use this. We're not going to change this page. It's for your reference if you're reading this on the web. So the first thing we have is a user login. Nice. Select ID user login from WP users. Wow. Yeah, this is actually my login that I chose for the WordPress installation. So we have the attribute that is called user __ login. And the anchor that it belongs to is, of course, a user. And the type that it has is, let me check, varchar with limit of 60. So let's write down varchar, or maybe just for completeness. And the physical location is going to be select ID user login from WP user. And the question that we're going to ask is, what is the login of the user? So WordPress is a typical database. It's pretty straightforward, but I guess that in this, all of this meta stuff is going to be interesting. So our those small queries for physical location, they are pretty straightforward. That's good. Because we don't want to, we don't, in more complicated schemas, if you are going to use, if your database uses things like flexible schemaless approaches or JSON embedded in database column or something like that, then those kind of queries are going to be more complicated. But we just describe even something that is kind of obvious, because later we will see something that is much less obvious than what we begin with. And that's why we begin with that, because we can kind of at least set our foot on this on all of this. Another thing is that, so those queries that we write here and in anchors and in links, like it's not like you're supposed to execute them blindly, right? Because, for example, if your table contains a few million rows, then of course you don't want to do this select. You will not see anything useful there because of too much data. But SQL is a common language for everyone. Everyone understands it, and we're using a pretty kind of tiny subset. So it's if you just want to see a sample of the data from your from a bigger database, you can just add limit or whatever, and this is not supposed to be automatically executed. That's what I'm trying to say. So next, we described user login. We see that it has an index on this column also. It's interesting that the index is not unique. So it means that you can have, technically you can have several users with the same login, but I guess that WordPress, maybe it just checks that in the application, on the application level, or we're not going to bother with that right now. So next step is user pass. It's probably a password. Let's see. Yeah. So pass is an encrypted password for this user. So we have another attribute that says user password. The anchor is, of course, a user. The type is varchar 255, and the physical location is user pass. What is the encrypted password of the user? So just in case, if you're gonna use this and try to decrypt my password, don't bother. The password is WordPress. I'm just saving you some time. And it's a password for the local instance of the WordPress, and I never use passwords like that in production environments. So anyway, we are going to remove user pass from here. Let's do another one more attribute of users, and then continue with something else. User nice name. Okay, user nice name is the same as for me is the same as my login. probably it means that I can add my real name there. And yeah, anyway. Oh, user __ nice name. Nice name. This is user. This is also varchar 50. That's not a lot for the name. And the physical location is going to be this name. What is the human readable name of the user? Human friendly name of the user. Right. Remove it. And remove, and there is a key on there. Interesting. I don't understand why it could be useful. Anyway, let's go back to posts and let's see what else we have here. So let's so we can either talk about post date or about post status. Both should be interesting topics. And well, okay, let's begin with post date. And we also see that there is a post date GMT here. So let's see how it all looks. So ID, post date GMT from WP posts. Interesting. So we have a timestamp when the post was created, but in minimal modeling, timestamp columns are often special. We do not declare each of the timestamp. So usually the timestamp column is not an attribute. And we're going to talk about that in more detail later in some other video. But for now, let's see if it's, so we can go to our second post, and what we want to see is if we can change when this post was published. So let's put it to June 13. So we close it. We now see that, did I edit? Why didn't I edit? Update. Yes, it now changed to June 13. And let's query again. Oh, yes, let's query again. And we can now see that our post number 5 now has the post date of June 13. And that means that this is not the timestamp of when the row was added in the database, but it's actually a data. So for example, it could be used if you import some posts from a different CMS, you can specify when those historical posts were created. And that makes post date an actual attribute, which is relatively rare. So let's do a user post date, which is on the post anchor, the type is datetime, and the physical location is post date. When was the post published? Here is probably when we want to use the remarks column. So we write here, could be overridden in UI, admin UI. And also what we want to say is there is also this post date GMT column that seems to be closely matched with the this the first column. And we also see this really interesting case when one of the dates is actually 0. I don't really know what that means, but we can, so what we can do here, we can look at in the sources, we can do a few experiments, we can ask somebody who is knowledgeable about WordPress, we can guess, we can ignore this column for now, and wait until we need this for something, and then we will be forced to find out how it works. And this is also kind of absolutely typical scenario where you find something in the database that is not really obvious immediately. And that's why we're documenting that. So has a, let's write it like this, has a sibling column post date GMT, right? Right? Yeah, post date GMT. Okay. So remove the post date. Well, you can also, of course, not. You can comment that out. So the idea of this file that we keep is that you see the progress, because when there are really like lots of tables and columns, you have to have a feeling that that you're doing something. And how I use this, so I keep this under Git, and so if I do git diff, I can see how much I've managed to document so far, right? And at the end of the modeling session, I can commit this. And then I will see my progress on a weekly basis and so on. Anyway, so let's kind of stop for now. We saw all the basic things that we do during minimal modeling. We of the existing database. We've created 2 anchors. We created 6 attributes. We created 1 link. I was going in the next video, I'm going to begin with comments probably, and then we're going to have more links here, of course. One interesting thing that you can now see is that Notion allows you, wait, what? Yeah, is that Notion allows you to quickly see how many attributes you have per each anchor. You can hide this. So this video is so last year, I think I wrote a post in my Substack. It's called 240 tables and no documentation. And it kind of describes all of this, not directly the minimal modeling procedure, but something really kind of close to that. So you can take a look. I'm going to put the link to this Notion page with all the links and all of this schema in progress in the description of this video, in my Twitter and in the Substack and whatever. And you can, maybe you're going to already be watching this video when we've progressed forward and there are more anchors and more attributes and even something else. Like at some point I'm going to show the approach to graphical modeling that we have kind of experimented with. This is completely different from the traditional table-based modeling that people use. So anyway, thank you for listening, for watching. I'm going to create the follow-up video with more modeling next. And you can subscribe to my Substack, and you can send the link to this video or to this page to whoever you think would be interested in that. Okay, have a good day. I'm going to stop recording.